after years of therapy and working the 12 steps, one of the things they ask you in rehab is, can you pinpoint that the time in your life when you first sought to use drugs and alcohol to escape pain or negative feelings? And for me, that was real easy. The first time I could pinpoint it is like when my dad died, because after my dad died, like getting high made me feel better about it. It helped ease the pain and not be so depressed and sad about it. And then from that point forward, anytime it bothered me that I felt like it was still my fault. I could just drink and get high and not think about it. And if I had an argument with my girlfriend at the time, or a fight with my brother or sister, whatever it was, got in trouble at school, I just go get drunk or high later and not think about it. And that was like my coping mechanism for many years.
Thanks for tuning in to the Elevation Recovery Podcast, your hub for addiction recovery strategies, hosted by Chris Scott and Matt Finch.
From what it sounded like, it first started at 13, or it might have started before that, but 13 was certainly the thing that happened in your life that looked like it started completely changed direction. Like when I read that, man, that hit me right here. And I bet you've probably heard this from a bunch of people by now, right?
Yeah. That's kind of a lot of people that know my story. They were like, you should write a book about this. And I finally got around to it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, a lot of different people have some tragedies in their life, and, and how you respond to it is, I guess, determines the person you're going to become, your adversity and kind of stuff. I was lost in drugs and alcohol for years because I didn't know any other coping mechanism until I finally got sober, and then, did years of therapy to process through it and realized it wasn't my fault, that my dad died. I mean, for a long time, I thought it was. That was like my cross to carry. And I drank and used over that for a long time.
What could you walk me through? Did you get professional treatment for grief or anything after that? Like, what was that period like? Because then your brother beat you up too, because he said it was your fault. You guys were playing not tag, but he was playing chase or playing something.
Yeah.
And then it was just a freak accident.
Yeah, we were just, me and my sister, I was 13, she was 11. We were having tickle wars with dad, and it was Saturday, and my dad drank a lot on the weekends. He usually put down a 6-pack or 12-pack. So he was pretty buzzed because it was in the early evening, the sun was just starting to set, and, he was, sometimes when he drank, he started tickling a little too hard. And, I was like, he's tickling too hard. This hurts a little. So I'm going to get away from him. We were in the bedroom and the bathroom in the master bathroom. And so once he let go of me, I ran out out their bedroom, down the hallway, through the dining room, and through these sliding glass doors on the dining room out onto our balcony. We had this huge balcony, and, he was following along, and I'm like, ha, 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 you can't catch me. And I ran all the way down the balcony. The balcony was like 50 feet long. And I took the right turn back into the master bedroom through those sliding glass doors. My dad, he was overweight, a sedentary lawyer, drank a lot, had a big old beer gut. He was probably 5'8", 250. And, he didn't make that right turn, and he went end over and landed head first on our driveway below off a 2-story balcony. And, my little sister was kind of following along behind him, and she was the one to see him go over, and she kind of got one hand on his foot, was trying to hold him for a second, but she was 11 years old. She couldn't hold a 250-pound man, and I was halfway down the stairs, just getting away from playing chase. Ha ha ha. I heard her scream, and I just kind of knew what happened. And, I was the first one down there, and I saw my dad just slumped on the ground, basically lifeless. His neck was all swollen. He had a gouge in his head from the top of his forehead to the back of his, where his occipital lobe is. And he just did not look good. There was a lot of blood, and he was just unconscious and brain dead. He broke his first 4 cervical vertebrae on impact. I mean, we didn't know at the time. We knew that after he went to the hospital. Ended up being in a coma for about 8 months. But, the doctors told us the very first night, I told my mom, if he ever, he's probably never going to come out of the coma. And if he does, he's brain dead. Because if you break your first 2, C1, C2, your atlas and axis, that's, it cuts up all communication between the spinal cord and the rest of your brain. So it's game
Vegetable.
over. Yeah. So, I don't know, but my mom held out hope that, somehow it'll pull through. And my only experience with comas at that point was watching General Hospital with my older sister. And there was this character named Grant who was in a coma on that show for 4 years, but then he woke up. So I just thought, oh, coma, he'll just be in a long sleep for a while, but eventually he'll wake up, but that never happened. He died 8 months later. And that was a whole kind of a mess because the insurance ran out. And these right to lifer people at the hospital were like, no, you can't pull the plug. And my sister basically, my mom was kind of a train wreck. She kind of had to, she was 19 at the time. She was a freshman in college. She's the oldest. She basically had to kind of talk to the doctors and basically told him to stop putting the food in his IV. And so they just kind of let him starve death and starve it out. So by the time he actually expired 8 months later, I mean, he looked like a Holocaust victim. He was sucked up, he's probably not much over 100-something pounds. It was weird, like how skinny he looked, and that was like the only way they could work it out with all these right to life people trying to stop us from pulling the plug. I mean, because he was going to be a vegetable anyway. It's like, why are we dragging this out? I mean, so that was a whole bunch of stuff to process. And my mom, raised us all Catholic and never sought therapy for any of us. I mean,
oh my goodness.
This was 1988. I mean, I guess
Right.
therapy was not, mental health was not as well received and, considered as important as it is now. We have a lot more people that, make sure that mental health awareness is going on, although we still need to keep doing more. And so she would say, the only therapy I need is a Catholic priest. And that was certainly not enough for any of us. We all needed some therapy. And many of us as adults went to get some therapy, and we've worked through it because that really changed our family dynamic completely after he died. We went from like, this upper middle class family to this family that's like, my mom just scraped by so we could keep the house. And, so we never got new fashionable clothes anymore. We were these kids in school with like these old hand-me-downs, and other kids were making fun of us. Yeah. And it's like, as a kid, that's a big deal.
Dude, and you know what else? So that's probably kind of like maybe even more than a micro trauma, because I mean, we're talking about the huge trauma with your father's passing, but going from that myself too, as far as the kids like making fun of me for going to the thrift store and having imitation Jordans from Target.
Uh-huh.
I'm not probably you too, like that stuff when you're little kids too, and they're making fun of you.
Yeah.
Oh my God, our egos at that point are like still being developed and that kind of stuff. I haven't endured many hardships as an adult that were as painful as some of the stuff when you're little kids, and even teenagers. Was that your experience too?
Yeah. I mean, as a little kid, it was just like, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was always, now looking back, I'm 46, and have done lots of therapy and lots of 12-step work. I was like always this anxious kid. Like I didn't realize it, but I was suffering from anxiety from as long as I can remember. And I was always insecure, kind of always felt like different from others, like I didn't fit in. And I used to act up in class because I wanted to get attention because, with 7 kids at home, I wasn't always getting as much attention as I'd like. And I was always a great student. Like I was always the first one done with my work, I was gifted. So I get bored because I'm done with my work and I start, being the class clown and making jokes because then I could get this attention that I wasn't getting at home. I felt sorry for my teachers. My punishment is that I've been a teacher for over 20 years and I've had to deal with the same kind of knuckleheads.
Oh yeah.
So karma's a bitch, but it is what it is.
Probably makes you a much more patient teacher and probably more creative too, and kind of outside the box. Like you don't strike me as a super traditional, like always by how everything's always been. You look very open-minded as far as, and a positive role model for people that age. Like, great job. But before you started to do all the therapy and do the AA work, you've done a lot of work for a long time, including exercise, which I want to talk about a lot because that's something at AA that's not focused on enough. But before all that's the work you did on yourself, there was the period of not knowing you were bipolar. I think you didn't get diagnosed till 27. Mm-hmm. So from the time of the trauma and then the micro traumas along the way, including, the arguing over at the end of your father's life, like, should we pull the plug? And that's just too much stuff. So you went into drugs was your first solution. Mm-hmm. Methamphetamines, other substances. Let's go right into there. When did that start? When did you realize, hey, I can use substances and that makes the pain go away? Or how did you get started with that?
Well, I had my first drink when I was 8. I was in 3rd grade. Had my first hit of weed when I was 9 in 4th grade. And my experience, I know that's so young. Talking about it like it's no big deal, but
What
man,
state did you grow up in again?
West Virginia.
Yeah,
So not as much to do
that
there.
makes sense then.
Yeah, I know, for real. There wasn't much else to do. I mean, as a kid, I mean, I'm sure that actually there's tons of things to do, but it's, I live in Southern California now, so there's like so much more to do here and right now near LA. But anyway, as an 8-year-old, 9-year-old, my older brother, he was 4 years older than me. So he was 12 and he was getting into stuff, he's in junior high, and he just let me do whatever he did. So, and I knew, we stole cigarettes off mom and dad. They smoked their Winstons, and, getting that little buzz off the cigarette when I was a kid, that was great. So we tried to do that every chance we could get, being in third, fourth grade. It's not like I was doing it every day. We probably did it once or twice a month, and usually on the weekend.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Good little buzz.
And then in middle school, it was kind of like, it's picked up a little more, a few times a month, and then by high school, it was like, every weekend. And, especially towards the end of my high school, it was like every day. Once I realized I wasn't going to get a college scholarship for all the sports I was playing because I wasn't good enough. And then, it just really progressed through college. I mean, I was mostly pot and alcohol. And again, like, after years of therapy and working the 12 steps, one of the things they ask you in rehab is, can you pinpoint that the time in your life when you first sought to use drugs and alcohol to escape pain or negative feelings? And for me, that was real easy. The first time I could pinpoint it is like when my dad died, because after my dad died, like getting high made me feel better about it. It helped ease the pain and not be so depressed and sad about it. And, and then from that point forward, anytime like, it bothered me that I felt like it was still my fault. I could just drink and get high and not think about it. And if I had an argument with my girlfriend at the time, or a fight with my brother or sister, whatever it was, got in trouble at school, I just go get drunk or high later and not think about it. And that was like my coping mechanism for many years. So.
And yeah, even with that coping mechanism, you're still able to hold things together. I mean, you have, you went to school and you have your master's and you've been teaching. So this stuff happened early on. Let's kind of fast forward to, I think it's around the age of 27 when you were, I think you did 4 or 5 rehabs, and out of this one, you went in with meth and other drugs. You came out, or maybe it was in the rehab, and you were having these, what you thought were withdrawal symptoms, but it was really like this crazy bipolar episode, I think. And then you wanted to move back in with, your wife and family, but she was like, no way. Your shit is crazy. I don't trust you at all.
Yeah.
She was like, no. And then this is what a lot of people don't understand about bipolar. That type of not only physiology you were going through, but the thought of her never taking you back and losing your whole family and everything. For someone in bipolar, like the suicide rate goes up like ridiculous. Like, I'm not sure the exact percentage. I think it's people with bipolar commit suicide 20 times more. I could be off, but I'm pretty sure that's close to it.
It's a lot more. Yeah.
And so you had a total freak, and you said it probably weren't serious, but you threatened, maybe you were, you threatened to walk in front of a train.
Yeah.
And then you went into lockdown. That's where you got diagnosed as bipolar. And it seems like that's where things, because until you get the right diagnosis, good luck living through life, man, if you don't have the right diagnosis. So you finally got it. Talk about how that went.
Well, yeah. At age 27, I was coming out of my 3rd or 4th rehab. That was 5 years from age like 26 to 31 or whatever. So vague and blurry, but I remember I was in rehab for like 2 weeks, and then the insurance ran out, and the whole 2 weeks I was in rehab, like I just had insomnia, and I didn't know it, but I was having anxiety attacks too. And I just racing thoughts, impulsivity. And, I got basically kind of kicked out of rehab because my insurance money ran out. And like you said, I wanted to move back home, but the wife wasn't having it because I was batshit crazy with all kinds of post-acute withdrawal syndromes and just out of my mind, and not making any sense because I'd been doing a bunch of speed before I checked into rehab. And, so I guess part of it was like I was still trying to detox from all the speed, but you would think 2 weeks later, some kind of normal sleep would come back. And I think I was just in a manic episode the whole time. So when I got out of rehab and she wouldn't take me back home, her parents said I could stay there temporarily until I found a sober living. And the first night I was there, I was just out of my mind. And I went to this really dark place. And I just thought, you know what? I can't live life sober. I don't know how to do it. And I never do it successfully. And I don't know how to, I want to live sober. I don't know how to do it. And I can't live not sober because, every time things get rough, or whatever, anything stresses me out, I just drink or use drugs. So I'm basically like, I can't live sober. I can't live not sober. So what's the point in even living? And I started writing this, I started journaling like they taught me to in rehab, but it turned into a 6-page suicide letter where I basically said, the F word was like every other word. And it basically said, the world's better off without me. Long story short, I'm out. And then I left that letter, in the room I was staying at her parents' house. And, I could hear the train going by because they lived a couple miles from these train tracks right by San Gabriel High School. And I called my mom and I called my wife and just told them real quick, you know what, you guys are better off without me. I'm out. And I drove over to the train tracks. And then I was like, the fear kicked in and I'm like definitely having a major anxiety attack because I'm just like shaking and I'm like trying to smoke a cigarette. And the cops swooped on me because my mom and my wife called them and, they put me in the handcuffs and that's very uncomfortable in the back of the car. And they took me to the psych ward and the suicide tank 5150. First, I was at LA County General Hospital for 24 hours and just out of my mind in there. And thinking that I'm like, not crazy and everybody else in there is crazy. I know I was probably the craziest one in there looking back, but trying to convince them that I wasn't crazy, like I'm Jack Nicholson and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or something, but that wasn't working. So then they transferred me back to Los Encinas Hospital in Pasadena, which is where I'd gone through rehab a few times. And the nurses there put me on a 72-hour hold. And after 72 hours, they still felt I was a danger to myself. So they put me on a back-to-back 72-hour hold. And I was really angry then, but I learned to calm down so that I could get out of that suicide tank. It's a week in a suicide tank sucks. And, that's when I got the diagnosis of bipolar and started seeing this shrink. And then they started kind of playing, like using me as a guinea pig to find the right medication cocktail that would actually help kind of, stabilize my moods and kind of get me back to some sense of normal. It took a little while because first they tried lithium and that just gave me the shakes. I was on that for a few weeks and I couldn't do that anymore. Then they tried Depakote, which worked for quite a while, but then I ended up gaining a lot of weight. So I chose to go off that. That was another thing as part of my story. It took me a couple of years to really get on the right meds and stay on them. Because when the meds worked, after a while, I'm like, well, I'm cured. I don't need these meds anymore. And I go off my meds. And sure enough, shortly after that, I'd relapse because I'd start, I'd start having symptoms and then I'd start self-medicating with drugs and alcohol. So I did that for a few years before I finally got stopped. Tired of hitting deeper bottoms with that. And finally go ahead.
Let's pause right there.
Yeah, no, that's a lot of stuff.
No, well, it is. But the only reason I want to pause is not because it's a lot, but because I really want to slow down for this part and focus on. So you first get the diagnosis and then you said it's like, you're like a guinea pig, right? Mm-hmm. And you kind of are because they've given you the diagnosis. It's probably the right diagnosis, right? Where you think, okay, but they don't look at your brain unless they're, there's some psychiatrists that do SPECT scans and other things. Most psychiatrists just, okay, this is the symptom clusters. Okay, so this is bipolar 1 or bipolar 2 or anxiety disorder or social anxiety. And then based on the symptom clusters and the disorder, they've got these different medications that they can give you and different treatments. So they didn't actually look at your brain. So they're to know which could probably work the best. So like here, this one usually works real well. Try this, try this. So meanwhile, and some of those drugs take a while to start working as well. Mm-hmm. So this is very common for people to first go, oh man, I got this mental diagnosis. Oh, I have to be on these medicines. Then maybe they start working even, but then after a while, you're like, I don't need these anymore. So then this is very common, especially with bipolar. Mm-hmm. Getting on medicines, getting off. I don't want to be on these. I don't need anything. And then coming off. And then there's these manic or hypomanic for bipolar 2, and then depression. Talk about some of the just gnarliest experiences you had regarding mania and regarding depression. And also, and then we'll get into how you finally started to be compliant with taking the medicines daily. And that's when everything clicked. But what were some of those gnarly depressions like and some of those crazy manias?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I'm a type 2 rapid cycler, but after being first,
oh my gosh. That's
yeah, I know. After first being diagnosed, I had some type 1 phases. Cause I remember, after I got out of that psych ward and I was getting on meds, I was, I had burned through a couple different jobs, and I was unemployed at home, and I'd wake up in the morning and I'd hear everybody else getting ready to go to work and school. And, I remember there were several periods where I was unemployed for weeks at a time or months at a time. And I just thought to myself, how do these people do it? Because there were times when I just did not want to get out of bed for quite a while. My wife's like, are you going to look for a job today? And I'd say, yeah, but, I just lay in bed all day. And that was, 27, 28, had a couple different 2 or 3 month periods where I've had depression like that. I haven't had depression like that since then, because I started taking my meds. And I started going to 12-step meetings, and I was like, we got to be self-supporting. It's one of the traditions of 12 steps. So I'm like, I got to get a job again. And when you actually get a job and start working again, you start feeling better about yourself. It's hard when you're unemployed. You feel like a loser, especially, as a father with 2 children. I got to, provide some bread for these guys, and I wasn't doing it. So it really messes with your self-esteem, which, it's like a vicious cycle, which again, encourage or kind of brings on more depression. But yeah, finally getting on the meds that would work, and then doing the things you said, the meds would start working, the symptoms would go away, I start feeling better, and then think I'm cured and I don't need these things, because the denial of bipolar is just as powerful as the denial of alcoholism and addiction, so I had to surrender to be an alcoholic and addict. And then I, eventually had to surrender, like, yes, I'm also bipolar. I got to do what the psychiatrist says and stop trying to be my own doctor here. So
I love that. Stop trying to be your own chemist, biohacker. And then all of a sudden, when you were stabilized, when you were compliant with the medicines, when you found a good medicine or combo that worked, and started to do the deep inner work too. So the medicine was to help to, reduce the symptoms or hopefully prevent them in your brain. But then the 12-step work, that was the community, the spirituality, the blueprint for how to be a good human being, right? I mean, I had a teacher when I went to school to become a counselor. I had a teacher that was an old timer, and he had never been addicted, but he did go to AA meetings, even though he'd never been addicted to anything, because he liked the blueprint for how to be a good human being, for connecting with people, for having a relationship with God. So it can really be used to recover from anything. But let's go to this part now too. There was a point where you were going to AA meetings. It was pretty early recovery. And I don't know if it was your sponsor or a friend or what, but someone said, oh, don't worry about what you're eating. Just, stay off the drugs and take your medicine, go to meetings. Don't worry about diet.
Yeah.
And so you didn't worry about diet. And not too long later, you were very heavy, maybe over 250 at 5'8" or 5'9", somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And then you're like, holy crap, AA does not know everything. And so you had to supplement with health. Let's talk about how that went.
Yeah. Every time I got sober, they would tell me not to worry about anything, but just stay sober, stay off the drugs and alcohol. So I go to all these 12-step meetings. When I finally got sober at age 33, I checked into rehab at 185, and it was 185. But then in that first year, I was going to all these 12-step meetings, sometimes 2-3 meetings a day. And I was eating the cakes and the cookies and just whatever I wanted, a sugar addict. And, in a year I gained 60 pounds, and it was like, a year and a half later, when I stepped on the scale on, was it December 31st, 2008, and it said 250. And I'm just like, whoa, I hated being over 200. And I'm like, at this rate, this rounds up, and I used to be really athletic in high school. So I'm like, I got to do something. So I made a commitment to stop eating seconds, start exercising every day. And I had made this deal with myself. You're not allowed to sit on the couch and be a couch potato and watch TV, Netflix, or play video games or whatever until you've done your exercise for the day. So in order to earn my screen entertainment time, I had to do my exercise first. And I've been sticking with that ever since January 1st, 2009. And, it's been like 12 years now. And I lost 60 pounds in 6 months.
You looked like a thug. There's a picture talking about the picture on your website. Yeah. Now you look like this really sweet, just spiritual family dude that's just sharing your story after years of being kind of ashamed about it, or at least not wanting the other teachers and students to know because of the stigma. Mm-hmm. So now not only did you do all this cool stuff, but you're like a positive role. You look like a thug though. So I like your physical, but also your kind of personality transition, because you just looked like, woo, scary dude, man. Looking
I
all
know.
big.
I know. I was wearing that Jerome Bettis double XL jersey and filling it out pretty well.
Just
And
looking, not smiling at all, just like,
yeah, well, I wasn't, I was not happy. I was depressed about being so fat, so losing the weight it helped lift the mood up because I was happier about the way I look in the mirror and just, how I feel. So I can move around a lot faster at 185 than I could at 250.
and so you started making these new rules to lose the weight and to keep it off, which when I read that, I was like, wow, it's so cool. An hour of fitness before you're able to do that stuff. There's another guy that's been a mentor of mine through the internet, Jordan Peterson. And when he talks to people about making your schedule for the day, it's stuff like that. Like, what's a schedule that you could actually do? So do some stuff, a little bit of stuff that you need to do, and make sure that you do some stuff you want to do too. So it's like, rewarding yourself for that is awesome. And you started off small, but then you got into not just fitness, but triathlons and ultra marathons, and the amount of stuff you've done is nuts. So when did you, I think it started off with maybe a half marathon. It started off low.
Yeah.
So let's walk down through that. So to sum it up first, childhood trauma, experimenting with drugs, realizing they could reduce pain and change consciousness and make life better, still getting through school, even though you were doing substances. And then all of a sudden, serious methamphetamine, other drug use, chronic relapsing, trying AA, all this, finally having the break, going to the train track. And that's where things started to reshape. And then all of a sudden moving along. So you're getting recovery time. You're getting healing from mental health, from bipolar. Everything's going good. Then the final part, so you had been doing your psychology. You've been doing everything but your biochemistry, basically. You've been doing your psychology and social and spiritual domains of recovery. But you weren't the biochemical pillar. You were just exacerbating all that stuff with cookies, cakes, and donuts. Mm-hmm. Started to get an exercise, made these new rules, which you've kept. But somewhere along the line then got, well, I'm going to do a triathlon. When did you get that idea?
When actually, so I lost those 60 pounds in 6 months, and I signed up to do a half marathon because I'd really gotten into running. At first it started out with just like a mile a day, or a few times a week. And then it's just back, because I had been a marathon runner in college, years before that. And so I did that half marathon and felt good. And shortly after that, though, I had this weird injury where it just basically felt like a steak knife was sticking into my hip joint. And I saw a few specialists, and they all agreed that basically what had happened is I'd lost so much weight so fast that my body kind of had not recalibrated for the new me. And so that's why I kind of had this, what they called an impingement. So I could,
those hurt.
Yeah. And I couldn't run like at all for like 2 months, but I was still on a mission to get more fit and lose weight. So I started cross training, and I started swimming, and I started biking because those are low impact activities that I could do without it hurting my hip. And after 2 months of doing that, my body finally recalibrated. It felt good, and I could start running again. And as soon as I could start running again, I'm like, well, there's this triathlon not too far away from here in August. I may as well just try a triathlon, and I went out there and had so much fun and did way better than I thought I was going to do. And I caught the bug, as they say in the triathlon world. And I'm like, I want to do more of this. So I got hooked on, doing all kinds of races, started doing marathons again, and just, I did a couple sprint triathlons, then I did a couple Olympic distance, and then I finally did a half marathon in October, just 3 months later, or 2 months later, whatever. And I felt great after that. And I'm like, wow, if I could do a half marathon, well, I guess I could do a full Iron or half Ironman triathlon. I could probably do a full Ironman triathlon too. So I found one that was, 9 months later in July up in near Santa Clara or it's called the Vineman Ironman. It's up in Northern California. And I signed up for that and followed this training plan, did a bunch of reading on how people do Ironmans, and went out there and did that and felt really good. And when I finished, I was like, well, I could probably do that faster. So for a few years, I just started to try to get faster times at the Ironman distance. And then I kind of started doing some ultras here and there, some 50Ks and a couple of 50 milers. And I don't know, it was like every time I finished one race, I felt good for a little while, but it's like, okay, what's next? I'm going to sign up for something bigger and better and faster or longer.
Outdoor physical challenge. If there's not too many things in the world that are better than that, I mean, it's outdoor physical fitness. So when a lot of people think of working out, like, oh, look at Tim. Oh, but he's so, but you started off, you were really overweight. Of course you were fit at one point in college and before that, but you started off slow and you worked up to this, and pretty much almost anybody can do it. Of course, there's different people's healths and stuff, but what's the hardest race that you've ever done?
It's so funny. Everybody always asks me that, and I always, there's three races that are definitely the top three hardest. So it's hard to answer with just one. The longest and probably the hardest race I ever did was the Oregon Double Anvil, which is a double iron distance triathlon. And I met a lot of people there that do those kind of things all the time. I did it once, and I was just like, I was on the bike for almost 19 hours, and just the saddle soreness after 19 hours on the bike was major. So I kind of didn't want to do that again. I mean, the race had a 39-hour time limit, and it consists of a 4.8-mile swim, which took me about 2.5 hours, and then the 224-mile bike. And I was the last one off the bike because I'm not a fast cyclist. And then a 52.4 double marathon run, which I did a little better at because I do like running and swimming. I enjoy, and I'm better at than biking. And that was a mission. I finished with 7 minutes left to spare. I was the last one to finish. 38 hours, 53 minutes. And the total time.
How many hours?
38 hours and 53 minutes. And I had 7 minutes left before, if I didn't cross it, in the time limit, I wouldn't have, got the finisher's medal and belt buckle and stuff. So I told him, no, at that point, I'm like, I'm just going to keep going because I'm going to, you guys can go and leave, but I'm going to get this mileage in and say I did the whole distance, even if I went over the time limit.
As far as the mental game of it, because these races just sound so grueling to someone like me that hasn't trained for them. So regarding the training, the nutrition supplements, all that, what's the hardest aspect to do this? Because a lot of people are interested in triathlons and these other types of races, but they don't really know a lot about it. So what are some of the things that were the hardest for you personally, whether it was the nutrition for it or whether it was like during the races, the mindset? What are some of the things that are the hardest and how do you overcome it?
God, I was so driven to do that stuff for so long. I think you kind of have to have some sort of like obsessive or addictive personality, like addicted to exercise, to really kind of develop what I call the ultra mindset. There's actually a book called The Ultra Mindset that talks all about that, because you have to have mental toughness. It's 90% mental and psychological and like 10% physical. I mean, if you put in the training, it's really, you get out there, and the mental part I think is probably the hardest. Through trial and error, when you start doing these, I mean, obviously start out with shorter races and build your way up. You learn how to, what nutrition works for you and what electrolytes work and don't work for you. Like I've learned, like a lot of these races, they give out these goos and these gel packets, but some of them are like orange flavor and lemon flavor. And if you get too much of the citric acid stuff and you're eating that all day, your stomach just blows up. And it's happened to me before, and I've seen it happen to other people, and that'll just ruin your race if your stomach blows up on you and you're puking. And staying hydrated is important too. I've been in races, like I was in AC 100 and I saw this guy just, he was just puking and puking and puking, and he would take in more water and it would just puke it right back out. When you get severely dehydrated, you end up throwing up. So and you try to get more water in you, but you keep throwing up, so you can't even keep water in you, and that'll ruin your race. So definitely stay on top of your hydration is really important in these long races.
That's awesome. I'm like thinking though, the first time I ever went through delirium tremens, or it was right before I went through it, I was drinking daily for months on end, physiologically dependent, until I couldn't hold it down anymore. Every sip of alcohol I took, no matter what type I tried, my body rejected it and just puked it back out, no matter what. And because of that, I went through delirium tremens because I couldn't hold any alcohol down. That was frustrating. Regarding your book, so I've done a lot of research about you. I've listened to other podcasts.
Oh, wow.
Your whole website.
Cool.
I wanted to ask you, do you recommend the Audible version or reading it before I get it?
Well, for me, I really have gotten into audiobooks in the last several years because, in the last several years, I've really been an ultra runner, and I run on all the local mountain trails around here. And sometimes I'm out on the trails for 6-8 hours or more, usually 3 to 6 hours. And I just love listening to audiobooks while I'm out there running the mountains. So if audiobooks work for you, yeah, totally audiobook. But if you like to sit down with a cup of coffee and read, then sure, get the paperback with the Kindle or ebook version.
Did you narrate the Audible?
No, I had thought about it too, but I just, I guess I didn't have enough confidence in my ability to articulate clearly and, sound professional. So I hired a professional.
No, that's awesome. Right on. So I think I'm going to read it. If it was your voice, I'd probably listen to it.
Hmm.
But I think I'm going to, you know what? I'm going to do both. I'm going to get the
Yeah.
Audible and the physical book. Want to know why? Because I know it's going to be totally epic. And when I'm done reading it and listening to it, I can pass the book on to someone else. And I want to encourage everyone listening, get the book, Tripolar, and then the end part is
This
bipolar.
the story of a bipolar triathlete.
I love that. So this book talks about deep into your transformation, but also you've got a system in there for not only mental toughness, but also for mental health, taking care of the body, mind, and spirit.
Hmm.
So talk about the book. Just go deep into everything about the book, because I want to hear way more about it from your own mouth rather than just reading about it. And I'm very passionate about this. This is a kick butt memoir that I'm just like, I just felt as soon as I was going to interview, I'm like, I just feel like his story needs to be shared with so many people.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. Most people who have already read it have said the same thing. I mean, I self-published and it's been available since July 2020, but some people are like, you really should try and land with the traditional publisher, which I've been trying to do, but it's really hard to land with one of those big five traditional publishers, no matter how good your book is, especially if you're a new author. You know, this is the first time I've written a book. So if you're already established, then, you know, you got an inside connection. But as for my book, you know, it kind of goes in three phases. It's 24 chapters, and the title of each chapter kind of tells you what the chapter's about, you know. First chapter is called Falling. You know, it's about, you know, my childhood and my dad falling off the balcony and, you know, me falling into drugs and alcohol. And then, the second chapter is called Things Changed. It talks about how our family dynamic changed from before and after my dad's death, you know. And then I think then one of the next chapters is called like First Addictions. It talks about how I was addicted to sugar and television early on before I started doing cigarettes and alcohol and weed and so on, you know, just progressing from one to the next gateway. And then it goes into, you know, what life was like to high school and college, you know, for a little while, meet my wife we met as freshmen in college and we're still together 27 years later. She's amazing. She actually really helped me with the final editing process of the book. So the narrative style, she really helped me lock that down, which made it kind of a reader-friendly book, a page turner. Most people I know said that once they start reading, they were able to get through it, you know, pretty quickly because we wanted to make it something that, you know, people wouldn't get bored.
Your wife helped you with editing.
Yeah. She wrote an afterword in the book too. Her name's Mariah Cohn, so she wrote like a little 5-page afterword at the end. So, because if you read through the book, you'll realize that I put her through thick and thin, and she still stood by me. So she talks about what she learned from Al-Anon, which saved our marriage, by the way. Al-Anon's for the family members or family, you know, of alcoholics and addicts. And if it wasn't for Al-Anon, we probably still wouldn't be together. She would have left me. So thank God for Al-Anon. And, and then it goes into my journey of being, you know, starting rehab, getting diagnosed bipolar and just trying to get sober. And then like the last third, it kind of talks about me discovering triathlons and exercise and ultras as this other thing I needed to do to kind of basically feel normal and stay even. Because, you know, the 12 steps and going to meetings was good for the, you know, human connection and taking care of the spirit, and staying on the meds was good, but I would still be anxious and have racing thoughts, even with the meds and the meetings, you know. And once I incorporated the exercise, I really could feel like I'm taking care of all three phases, the mind, body, and spirit, you know. And then at the end of the book, there's some appendices. I think it's on page 365. I have like the top 10 skills you need for achieving any kind of life goal. And then I have training plans for half Ironman, and double Ironman distance, and training for 100-mile distance. If you're into, not everybody's going to want to go run 100 miles, but for anybody who might be so inclined, you know, those are the training plans I use and still use when I'm training for these kind of races. So I just thought I'd share kind of like my regular, you know, weekly workout routines building up to big races.
So cool. It has all that in there. Has anybody ever told you that, I mean, it's nowhere near identical, but your story is reminding me very loosely of David Goggins. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. He was like, 300 something pounds. And then he lost a bunch of weight, and his childhood was very traumatic too. He would get beat, and it was really crazy.
Yeah, I read his book. I listened to it on audio.
Yeah, I listened to that one on audio. How good was that, right? So
yeah,
so there's just something very. The transformation process is just a beautiful thing. It's in like our collective unconscious is the hero's journey. So you went through your own hero's journey, and now you're sharing your experience with others so they can go create their own. But regarding what's the last few things that I want to ask you? What are the three things that you absolutely have to have for your life to be awesome?
I have to have regular exercise. I got to keep working my 12-step fellowship, and and I got to stay med compliant with my psychiatrist. Medical. Right now it's Lamictal and risperidone, which I've been on for over 12 years, and have been stable. No episodes. Little anxiety here and there, but nothing major.
What would you tell people that feel like they could be bipolar? Like if they're listening to this and going, wow, some of these, I feel like I've had hypomania or hypermania. Like I feel like I've had, what would be like a good first step to recommend to someone if they're having any type of mental health issues? What are some tips you'd give them if they're like been avoiding it because of the stigma or because they're confused or because they're afraid? What helped you to just break through those fears and actually go and do it and keep with it this time?
What helped me really was kind of getting sick and tired of being sick and tired, doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results, but getting the same results. So I'd recommend to anybody who actually is aware that they're having symptoms is to read up on bipolar disorder, or if they think they have some other mental health disorder. For bipolar, I'm a type 2 rapid cycler, but for all bipolar, it's coupled with depression, anxiety, impulsivity, racing thoughts, and other things. So look up all the symptoms, and chances are, if you're having 2 or 3 or more of those, that you could be bipolar. You might want to see a professional. And I would also highly encourage the family members to kind of, be a second set of eyes to monitor them. Because for me, the last time I went off my meds, it took my wife almost 9 months to realize I'd been off my meds. Because when you're on these meds for a while, and they have like a 3 to 6 month half-life, so you can go off them, and
I didn't know that about that.
They can still kind of be doing their good thing for you for a while, so for like 3 to 6 months I didn't have that many symptoms, but by 6 months,
how misleading. You're like, I'm cured.
Yeah, but no, at 6 months at this point, like I was just raging, like my anger was way up. Like the kid would like spill some milk, and like, what the hell are you doing spilling milk? Well, what are you, an idiot? It's like, it's like, whoa. It took she was recommending I go to anger management. It was actually her friend, one of her best friends that was over, that asked her, he's like, is Tim still on his meds? And she finally confronted me, and so this is why because I was like having insomnia, but it was really just mania. And this is why you've been coming to bed late and waking up early and doing all stuff. And me, I was trying to tell myself I'm not bipolar. I don't need these meds. And I realized I was having some symptoms, like my libido had gone way up, and my impulsivity was going up, and my rage was going up. So I just tried to go to more 12-step meetings and exercise more. I'm like, that'll solve it. I don't need these meds, but it wasn't enough. And my wife basically set an Al-Anon boundary with me. She's like, look, you got to tell your shrink what you've been doing. We were going in there together, schedule an appointment today. And so I went with her to my shrink and told him what I'd done.
Good for her for being, she's like, you know what? Your brain is straight compromised. I'm the motherfucker in charge, I'm going to run this, because until your brain gets good, and more family members and spouses need to do that.
Yeah.
They need to put their foot down in a compassionate way, but a way where there's clear boundaries. Like, hey, I love you. I'm going to help you through this, but here's what I will not tolerate. And so it can help people get into treatment and get healthy so much faster when families intervene.
Yeah. Thank God for Al-Anon that she was able to do that, because if she, Al-Anon taught her how to set healthy boundaries. And, like I said, she's like, if you're not going to stay on your meds, you can't live here. And that was the last thing I wanted. I want to be home and be the father and husband, husband to her and father to my children. So I was like, okay, I guess I got to get back on these meds. And I've been on them ever since. That was in August 2009 when I had that thing. Like part of going off the meds too was like I thought my meds were making me fat, so I went off my meds so I could lose weight, and I lost all that weight. But and then I was like, you got to put me on different meds this time. I don't want to gain the weight back, because I lost all the weight, and that kind of all happened at the same time. It was crazy, but thank God I got back on meds and didn't gain the weight. I just kept my exercise routine, and so
that's so awesome. And the really, really sad thing is, I mean, you're a success story. You're doing great. You got so much good momentum. Oh man, your family's so beautiful. I love just looking at pictures of you guys. Looks from where you were to where you are. But still, there's, I don't know how many tons of people are suffering from bipolar and not knowing it, because they either haven't gone to a psychiatrist or they haven't got the right diagnosis. And I know there's even free online assessments that aren't 100% obviously, but people can even go on there. Like, and substances will often induce manic episodes in bipolar 1 or 2, right? So like when you took meth, or were there certain substances that would make you go up way faster?
Oh yeah, cocaine and methamphetamine definitely.
The
You
biggest
know,
dopamine boost, yeah.
when I was having a manic episode without drugs, it felt almost the same as being on cocaine or methamphetamine. It's like that high and just like, talking a mile a minute, like, la, 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 people like
Yeah.
slow down. And I just could not slow down. Like the rapid speech was real when I was in mania or when I was on coke or methamphetamine.
Yeah, dead giveaway when someone is hypomanic like that. Opioids even and alcohol can give people the hypomania, like that. Opioids, when I used to do those things, they would make me hypomanic. My friends, a lot of them would be like drooling and sleeping, and I'd be like blah, 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 all confident and energized and stuff. So this is great information. I can't even thank you enough for coming on the show. And I want to recommend everyone buy your book. It's on Amazon. It's on Audible. Where can people learn more about you? You could put your website name, any companies you're affiliated with, and just as your chance to plug everything that you're doing, that you're excited about, and where people can find you.
Yeah. I have a website. It's ultratimdavis.com. It's got all my social media links on there. My Instagram handle is tripolar_Tim. And then my Facebook and Twitter handles are ultratimdavis1. On the website, there's links where you can buy my book. And like you said, it's available on Amazon, Audible, Apple Books, Barnes and Nobles. It's available in ebook, audiobook, and paperback. And on my website, I keep a weekly blog. I mean, on my social media, I kind of post about races I do and stuff about the family. It's not all just professional stuff. It's a mix, I try to post different things, but it's kind of
lifestyle stuff.
Yeah, lifestyle stuff. Yeah. So.
And are you working with a publicist, or like what's your, obviously you want to spread the word, have people read your story and maybe resonate with it and go, oh my gosh, and so to make a difference, to contribute, to give back, to help change the conversation and to reduce the stigma. What's like your big picture goal? Is that just it? Or did I miss anything? Is there something else specific that you want to do with this movement, with your book, with speaking?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked me that. I really wanted to lead me into, I didn't know it at the time. When I first wrote the book, it was like, just write the book. And then after I wrote the book, I talked to other people who had written books, and they educated me on the fact that once you write a book, you kind of really have to have a platform for your book. And I didn't even know what that meant, but now I do. And so I thought about it. I'm like, what's my platform for the book? And it's like, well, I was diagnosed bipolar at age 27. I didn't write this book till age 46. And for 19 years, I didn't tell people I was bipolar. I mean, except for my close family and a few close friends. I was ashamed of it, And then once I wrote the book and it was out there, I'm like, well, I'm releasing. I published it in July 2020. I'm like, I guess I'm telling the world now if a lot of people actually read the book. So I was like, that's my platform, is like, stop hiding behind my bipolar, my mental health issue. And, so now I'm a proud mental health advocate. I had no idea writing this book was going to make me become that. But, if you go to my website, you'll see that I have lists of mental health resources. I post regularly about mental health. I donate and support NAMI, the National Alliance for the Mental Illness. They're a great organization. Anybody who has mental health issues or know people with mental health issues, get on the NAMI website and you can learn everything you need to know. They got all the great resources. And so that's my mission now, is just to promote mental health awareness, break the stigmas, and also encourage people that, doing regular physical exercise is very important for your mental health. I mean, although some of us like me, we need our meds too, but the meds alone weren't enough to make me really feel kind of the inner peace that I wanted to achieve. So it's the meds, the 12 steps, and the exercise, those three things, mind, body, spirit, that help me stay right in the head.